Yeah, welcome to another installment of Truth or Questions with your host, I'm Better Than You Is. If you haven't seen the first episode of this, it's entitled Truth or Questions uh, Introduction. Go ahead and listen to that first before going ahead with this video, for the simple reason there are some certain criteria involved in answering these questions, which is explained in that video. If you haven't seen that yet, by all means, go ahead, do that now before you watch this video. If you have already seen that, then okay, no worries. You should know the drill by now. Question 105. Following up on the previous question, which is in the previous episode, how did the conspirators in Operation Northwoods plan to get Castro to repeatedly take responsibility for downed airliner, the way that Osama bin Laden has repeatedly taken responsibility for 9/11? 106. Further, none of the Northwood scenarios involved actually killing innocent Americans. Examples they would use would be shooting down an empty drone aircraft, sabotaging an aircraft at Gitmo Airfield, fake riots at the gates, non-lethal bombings of base facilities. So, how does this in any way equate to proof of 9/11 being a conspiracy? Blah 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 blah. 107. Twoof claimed that it was impossible for Flight 77 to make the 330-degree turn it made before hitting the Pentagon. The plane would fall out of the sky. Apparently, in kook world, planes are like bullets. They're shot out of a gun and they never turn. Uh, they also claim that Flight 77 flew over the Pentagon, but not into it. Two different theories there contradicting each other. If it was impossible for the flight to make the 330-degree turn before crashing into the Pentagon, how is it suddenly possible for 77 to make the same 330-degree turn before flying over the Pentagon? Why is the exact same 330-degree turn impossible if the plane crashes, yet suddenly possible if it's a flyover? And furthermore to that, how come they say it must be a missile because the pilots weren't trained well enough, and but some cunt with a remote control could have done it. Um, so, but the plane wouldn't have been able to take it. But would have fallen out of the sky and broken up. But you know, it would have been all right if the plane was remote controlled, um, or the pilots on board were kamikazes, and yes, they could entirely have done it because they were veteran trained pilots. All these little niggly little aspects to it. 108. Kooks claimed that the speed of the plane was impossible at 800 feet. The air is too thick. Yet, they claim that Flight 77 flew at high speed over the Pentagon. Uh, how is it that speeds are impossible in thinner air, yet completely possible in thicker air? Only, but only possible if it's a flyover. Kooks, please explain how the laws of physics changed in at the Pentagon that day. 109. Twoofer's claim the government immediately blamed Al Qaeda for the terrorist attacks. Now, in actual fact, the government did. A lot of people were speculating that it most likely was Al Qaeda. There's plenty of video on YouTube to go back and listen to uh, interviews and stuff like that, and people are like, yeah, okay, terrorist attack, but we can't really say terrorist attack because we don't know for sure yet. It may be Al Qaeda, but we can't say for certain. Blah blah blah. Yeah, Swoopers claim that the government immediately blamed Al-Qaeda for the terrorist attacks, even before the buildings fell. Then they point to the FBI Director Mueller, stating in October that they were not completely sure of the hijackers' identities. If the FBI was not sure in October of 2001 who the hijackers were, how can they have been immediately blaming Al Qaeda before the towers even fell? 110. If the terrorist attacks were so obviously false, why hasn't any country, even countries that hate the US, gone to the UN and demanded sanctions against the US, or demanded US troops leave Iraq or Afghanistan? We know, for example, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, there was an instant outcry worldwide. The UN demanded immediate and unconditional withdrawal, obviously, since the UN opposed the US in Iraq. It didn't support the war there. There is no logic in assuming that the UN will just go along with what the US wants. The Iraq and Afghanistan wars would be treated the same. If the UN actually believes uh, the US was in the wrong, why has not one country, not even countries that hate the US and would love to humiliate the US in any way, shape, or form possible, have come forward to claim that it was an inside job? Number 111. Journalists worldwide, especially in much of the in much of Europe, despise the US and Bush, um, pretty adamantly. um, there's no end to the critical stories. So, even if one could pretend the domestic media would never print anything critical of the government, there is no valid pretense uh, that the international media would somehow be controlled by the US government. So, why hasn't one serious reporter ever published an inside job claim? Many countries hate the US. This is what it's actually saying here, not my opinion, but yeah, not my fault if it's true. Um, Many countries hate the US, and they certainly would never object or pressure a reporter from bashing the US. Yet, no serious reporter, journalist, or investigative reporter has touched the conspiracy. Why? Because they want to keep their jobs, unlike Stephen Jones. Anyway. Boobies.